Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We've got another great show here for the Women in Safety, and we're looking at women in safety throughout the years in health and safety. And I'm here with Amandeep. Amandeep, who do we have today? What are we doing?
Hey everyone, good morning. So we have three wonderful guests. They happen to be my good friends as well. So we have Candice Brown, we have Stacey Glanville, and then we have Janice Stanley here. All three women in safety. And thank you to the audience for coming out for our final panel as well.
Great. No, I'm so glad to have you all back again. This is so exciting. And it's a topic I know for Amandeep and myself that is so passionate that in our hearts that we've been wanting to have. You know, it would be really great to understand better when you guys were coming into the workforce, into health and safety. Was there anything going on with the women's movement or maybe women's issues that really impacted your decision? Stacey, why don't you lead us off in this?
Okay. What impacted me? You know what, I'm coming into health and safety in a predominantly male industry. I learned pretty quickly that to gain respect was really important because sometimes you don't get taken seriously right away just because you're safety. First of all, a lot of don't want to have to do some of the things you're asking them to do. So getting to know them, working with them, and gaining the respect goes a long way.
Yeah, just call, make an appointment.
Oh, I think you're muted there.
Yep, no, go ahead. That was Malcolm. Okay. Just he hadn't muted, so we'll edit this out later, but charge on.
No worries. Hi, Malcolm. Anyway, yeah, so just saying.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so just working with the trades, dealing with resistance, you learn pretty quickly that you need to have a thick skin and learn how to read the play, stick to the things that are important that you need to execute. And yeah, just it's kind of take it as it comes. You can prepare as much as you want, but until things start unraveling and rolling in front of you, then you need to be sometimes quick thinking on your feet and make some executive decisions in the moment and hope things go the right way, I guess.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from, you know, especially when back then coming into the workforce, it was very unusual for women to be in certain roles. I recall myself just coming out of high school, you know, it was 1990 and I wanted to be a police officer, but my guidance counselor was pretty confident that was not the role for a young proper lady to be doing. And she kind of, you know, barricaded that idea left, right, and center. So it kind of made it hard to then decide, what am I going to do? You know, my heart was set on this. Where do I go? Janice, what about you? What was your experience?
You know, when I think back about it, there was a movement happening where employers needed to bring on women. It was becoming a stigma where employers noticed it was. Stacey said it all, so I'm coming up with something different because I would have said what Stacey said. But you think about if there was a women's movement happening, employers had to start recognizing that because there were women that were coming out of the home, being mothers, and now having to come into the workforce because of divorces. There wasn't divorce rates like 50 years ago like there are today. So women were forced to go back to work. Some women are not suited for an office at all, like me. So you got to go into work that is male dominated. So how do you make your step in there? You've got to get your allies together. You've got to get your name hires out there. You've got to get your people connected to you that understand who you are. You've got to build, like she said, build that respect, get them to earn your respect. And then once you got them to earn your respect, then I think you've got a better option of being hired out into a man's field. But you've got to have tough skin. You got to almost talk like they do. You can't back down. There's all those things. But yeah, I think they had to step up because there was a women's movement happening and a lot of employers just didn't have enough females employed. That's how I got involved. I told you long back when we spoke last, is the our Angus wanted women to drive their heavy equipment because he realized they were softer on the equipment than the men were. Right? So women do bring another style of passion to the workforce.
I also think that we should add that, there comes a little element of bravery, right? To be able to walk in there with your shoulders square and, face the music and see what's going to shake loose, right?
It happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary. Mm-hmm.
Can be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Candice, share with us your experience.
Definitely what both the other ladies are saying resonates with me as well. I agree with Janice that there was a bit of a movement with women expanding and needing more independence. I think typically, back in that time, even before I was entering into health and safety, women were predominantly working in administrative type roles that didn't pay as much. And so when you're out on your own and you need to pay your bills, you're going to go to where the money is, and that's in trades, right? In my experience, I grew up with a mother who worked in male-dominated industries. So I kind of had an idea of what it was like, what she was experiencing. I watched her go through a plethora of jobs because when issues started to arise with whatever harassment issues she was facing or, interpersonal issues she was having with some of her coworkers, it always came down to, well, it seems to be you're the common denominator here because you're the woman, so you've got to go. It wasn't like a systemic kind of, we have this mindset of, amongst our male workers that are causing these issues. It's because you're the outlier here. So I watched her go through that. And then when I went into, that being said, even when I went into health and safety, I still didn't really feel prepared for what I encountered. Harassment was common, very male dominated, not a lot of tradespeople on site that were women, maybe one I met in my several years out on site. So there wasn't a lot of people that I could talk with. I didn't have a lot of support, role models, that kind of thing. I had to seek that out, find and build relationships with the males who were kind of more forward thinker, at least open to having a female on the job site. But it was awkward, it's an interesting experience to be the only female on a job site, and you walk into the crew room in the morning and you're getting ready and the whole atmosphere just changes. They're used to having their boys club in there. They're talking with each other the way they talk. It's not as professional.
For swearing.
Yeah, with the pictures of the ladies, naked ladies up on the walls and stuff. You're walking into that kind of environment, and I have to be okay with this. So it was definitely difficult to be in that kind of an environment, and I think it made me a little bit more resilient, actually, starting off in that. So, you have to overcome it and find where you fit and find how to talk to completely different coworkers than you're used to talking to in other jobs. So yeah.
I actually think that it just kind of dawned on me now that probably the fact that I grew up with two older brothers probably helped a lot for my comfortability with that kind of situation, because being around them and their friends and, it's the shop talk, and women shop talk too, but, just to kind of know how to navigate those situations. So some of those situations weren't as foreign to me to walk into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would find the challenge more is that, safety, you have an important role. You need to speak up at certain times and have non-negotiable hard lines. And that you got to be brave to do that, because the pushback is there, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, just interesting, all the different experiences
and that's like how we were nurtured. That's how we were brought up. So I really like what you're thinking here, because I myself grew up with my mom and my sister. My dad and my mom divorced when I was young. So, and again, even then, you know, there was the expectation about how girls would behave and wouldn't behave, what was and wasn't appropriate. And I agree with you. I think that had a big impact on how we navigate the workplace landscape.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask that too. What do you think prepared or brought you to the point where it was your first day, like on site, on the job, doing either the trade or safety? And because I know all three of you, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Stacey with the brothers, Candice, you had such a strong mom, and same with you, Janice, like you, everything that you went through brought you to that point. And so it resonates with me as well, because I had strong male figures growing up. So I had three brothers. My dad, he always treated us the same. And I essentially, yeah, I grew up as a tomboy, like growing up, playing in the mud, playing in the dirt, my dad teaching me how to run heavy equipment. And so it just kind of everything like naturally progressed, and it led us to that point as well. And then talking to other tradeswomen or other women in health and safety or in construction, it's very similar. Like you can draw a lot of parallels from the different stories as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
I did find when I was taking my education at BCIT for health and safety, I did find that there were a lot more females in the job though, which surprised me. I always chalk that up to being that maybe more females were drawn to that position, because you do have to influence people and be good at building relationships, collaboration, you know, that kind of thing, things that females typically they have those skills innately, or at least they have the drive to have those skills. I think females are good at that. And so health and safety started to be, when I was entering kind of more into the, you know, educational side of it and getting schooling, finding that all those females were in there, it was empowering for me. Okay, like I'm not going out here alone to work with just tons of men. Like I do have people around me that I could speak to, right? Through my courses, and that's where I actually found quite a bit of my support. When I was out on site, it's nothing like having a rough day and then being able to like text or call one of your cohorts and, hey, this just happened to me today, OMFG, like, can you believe this? Has this happened to you before? How do you deal with this? Oh my God, you know, just having those conversations really helps. But yeah, it's interesting that health and safety has attracted more female people. Wow, more females, but trades has not quite yet, right? I work in construction. I don't know about you, Janice and Stacey, but
yeah.
Do you think that the leadership now in health and safety has turned a bit of a tide where they're more open and supportive to women coming into this field?
I would think, to be honest with you, I think WorkSafe has probably done a lot for that. Because we see a lot more female prevention officers than there typically once was, right? That used to be kind of a man-only job. And I think that that's probably helped the progression a lot, because obviously they're the regulatory body that we follow. And so when they're sending in their inspectors and they're bringing women into the field, I think that's probably helped a lot with the progression of women in safety and the sort of raising the bar that women do need to be respected. And I'm sure there was probably some hard times those women went through too, molding that for us. But I would say that, yeah, that probably helped a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. I think that those of us who've been here for, you know, I remember when I walked in, there was not a woman in sight in health and safety. The fact I wanted to be a health and safety corporate level regional manager was taken right off the table for me when I came in. Yeah, it was not an option. I was clearly told that I have a son, so I should be close to home and be the one to be looking after him. And that maybe when my son was growing up, then we could consider whether or not it was a suitable match. And I went for the interview, and my other boss said, you nailed that interview. I don't understand. And they brought in somebody who was junior to me in education, hadn't even finished his degrees, and gave him the job, right? And so to say like that goes back to like, well, the best person for the job should get the job, right? Remember that was a comment. And
Yep.
what I had said there in retrospect to that was, but if people aren't even in the pool who are underrepresented, then how do they even get those opportunities? And that's why for me, creating an equitable playing field is so critical, Stacey, is because what I've been seeing historically is the best person suited for the job doesn't always get it.
Yeah.
Because there's other kind of biases at
Yep.
play. Like okay, Janice, you're shaking your head. What do you think in there? I've heard a nerve, have I?
I can't even answer that right now, to be honest with you. I can't. I have to think about that one for a minute.
Oh,
Go
take
to
your time.
somebody else to see, but
It's a deep one, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. And
Your education is obviously important. I get that. And I know some of you girls have had your education. I've had some education, but my experience is more in the field.
mhm.
And I have literally come across a gamut of personalities. And I have been under, I've been looked over for different positions as well. Like you have had the qualifications, overqualified. And I wonder sometimes if they hire the junior people because it's a financial thing. You know, sometimes you can become so educated and so experienced that you're actually pricing yourself out of the market. So we've got to look at that too. But when I look at it, and when I say that, I also think, boy, there's lots of positions out there where people are in the six-figure range, and it's not male dominated anymore. Women are actually getting up there. So I think we're seeing a slow progression, but it sometimes name hire helps to get you into a position. You know, knowing somebody, like, you know, we have a panel here of good friends, and maybe somebody knows you're looking and they offer, you know, an opportunity to you. But yeah, it's a lot of work. I feel like it's a lot of work.
How about this this concept though? Like if you look around where you're working on your team and you keep seeing people who only resemble your own background, your own being, you're like essentially a paper cutter of yourself kind of thing, right? As management. Would that not be an indicator that you need to kind of move out of that narrow box and start looking at individuals that when they're coming across your desk, they're bringing different backgrounds and cultures and
some of
like,
the experience I've gained is by talking to people like yourselves, right? Going out there, like Candice said, you have a bad day, you call somebody, they tell you, yeah, I've been through that, do this. What greater education could we have is peer education, because we're only going to learn from the experiences we've had to go through. Yeah. And for me, it's just a no-brainer. Call on your peers, call on whoever, because we can't profess to know it all. But I think bringing in the different men, women, young, old, it doesn't matter. I talked about perspective before. You have to get that perspective. Otherwise, we're not growing and we're not changing. If we, like you said, you got the cookie cutter manager and he trains and teaches everybody the same way, but not everybody learns the same way. I might excel and be so different in one area and somebody else is better in that. So let's share that rather than oh no, I know this and you know that. No, let's come together, right? How else are we going to become cohesive? But
yeah, I totally agree with that. Like diversity is definitely key if you want to grow and develop on that level. In terms of having that shift or being more inclusive, I think it always comes from the top down, meaning that leadership, management, whatever it may be. And sometimes there are organizations where they want to have that shift or change. They really genuinely, purely do, but they just don't know how, or they don't have like a roadmap. And so an example is, I'm with Salus now, and Gabe is not only my boss and CEO, he's a friend of mine. And so we've been friends for years. And I remember a few years ago when he was first starting off, we had this conversation and he's like, Amandeep, I need to talk to you about something. I'm like, yeah, sure. What is it? And he's like, it was a Friday afternoon. I was looking around the room and I was seeing all my employees, and it was predominantly white male and relatively young. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I want more diversity. I want to grow Salus and have like a good culture where we're inclusive. And I was like, okay, yeah, yeah. And he's like, but I'm trying so hard. Like we're trying to find programmers or developers, and it's hard because in a lot of these occupations, they too are male dominated. And he's like, it's really hard. And I'm like, okay, I understand. But on the same note, please don't go hiring females just because they're female. You need to look at their qualifications or education. You have to look at their experience as well. And I'm like, I know you mean well, and you're coming from a really good place as well. And we will eventually get there. And we are like, we have women in development now, programmers, marketing. We have females in our customer success group. So we're getting there. It's baby steps, right? But like for him to have that thought and being genuine and open and almost being vulnerable as well, saying that, hey, we're not there yet. We don't have that diverse work place, but he's saying that he wants to get there. So I mean, kudos to him, because I'm pretty sure there's other Gabe Guettas out there.
What about succession planning? Is this maybe one of the ways that businesses could make that more, feasible, is looking at who is working already in your company, right? That shows an interest, and then bringing those people up. What about that idea?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, how do you do that? How do you do that? Because if you get, like if we're looking to hire somebody, we put out an ad about it, and then you take in the resumes, and the first thing you do is it's a piece of paper with information on it. So it's not even really about the person. You're looking at their qualifications and skills. So how do you, when you got 90 resumes, do you separate male from female? Do you look at the name and try to go, this will be this ethnicity, this will be that, like, so how do you do that? Like, how do you draw them in if you beyond what you're already getting?
Well, I think, okay, so if we were looking at succession planning, that's coming from within the company already, right? So that would mean that they're in your system. They're already being managed by people. So then I think, could it be a potential that there is programs that help people do career development inside the company first as a first step? And then you move to, if there's nobody inside the company, taking it outside. What are people's thoughts around those kind of ideas?
I think there's so many.
Person. Oh, sorry, go Candice.
Yeah, I'm with Stacey and Janice's sentiment. Hire the right person for the right job, rather than, what Amandeep said, we need to fill a capacity of a certain amount of female ratio in the office or the fields, hiring that way. But there's a lot of layers at play here. And I think certain things need to be changed at a societal level, breaking down negative beliefs about, we're going down the path of not just women in workplaces. We're going down the path of, different people of color or whatever, right? We're kind of talking about that too. So I think there needs to be a lot of advocacy around that first, before you could start saying, well, putting the onus on employers to say you should be having, equitable recruitment practices and advancement practices in your organizations. We need to do a little bit more awareness on why those things would be beneficial to organizations, I think. And then have leadership within certain industries to be able to say, hey, there's benefits for your organization to do this, and here's why. There's, speaking solely about women, there's reasons why there's benefits for women in the workplace. There's reasons why women work well in the field with men. They balance off each other, different skills, different genders, right? different type of an work environment that maybe employers don't recognize quite yet. So I think something needs to happen there at kind of like a macro level before, maybe not before, but in conjunction with looking at organizational levels and saying, when you're looking at recruiting people, maybe promote differently to different groups or reach out to different industry groups to get different people, you know, or take a look at your hiring practices like Gabe did. You sit down one day and look at your office, you go, it's all white males. Like, what am I missing something here that might be contributing to my organization in a positive way by having people with different perspectives, maybe different skill sets if they come from different areas of the world, you know. So I think there's layers that way. And then I think somebody had mentioned, looking at the resume, it was you, Tamara, saying, well, you'll have your son soon, and so you're just not going to fit exactly what we need. Well, I can see where that comes from on an employer side. You know, they need someone there from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you're working on a construction site, they need you to be able to bounce around to job sites and not have, like, you don't need to be home at a certain time, or you need to be flexible. They need people like that. But could they take a look at that and do things a little bit differently? So having like those supports, interpersonal type supports for women in particular, because like Janice said, if they're single women working on their own and they have kids, you know, kids go to school, they need to go to daycare, they got to be picked up at certain times. All those things come into play when you're trying to go to work and do a job.
So
how much of
Candice,
that
let me ask you this though. Is it the employer's place to make a choice for my life and say, you can't do this because you're a single parent and you must stay at your home? Is that the authority of the employer, really? Because I'm going to push back on that. I was very offended because I had the supports to do, I wanted to apply for the job. I put my resume in. I'm a competent adult. I know what I can do.
Maybe 20 years,
you know,
or 30 years ago, that might have worked, you know. But women changed the workforce when they came into it, and employers had to change their tactics, their policies, their procedures. Now we have parental leave. Never used to include the husbands. Now it includes the husbands, right? So when I was in the workforce 40 years ago, you were out of work, you were out of work. You didn't have support. You were lucky to get your job back. So people were afraid to go on leave or go have if they had an accident, they were afraid because they thought, well, there goes my job. Yeah. But now we have injury management programs, we have family programs. So that'll change when women stepped up. I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've progressed, like women's rights as well. The right to vote came first, and then the introduction of birth control, for example, and those rights, like the legislative rights, and there were both male and female that push for that as well. Tamara, you had a really good point, and I'm not sure if Stacey and Candice want to speak to this briefly, but being single parents, like how did that impact your ability, not your ability, but how did it impact your employment and your work? If you guys want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that when she was talking about it, and it was, you know, the employer has, this is what we need from you, this is the time and day and what you need to be available for. And so for me, it was like, you need to know that you're available for that, but outside of that, it's all the pressure behind the scenes of everything else you have to manage, you know. And I've had friends of mine that are married with kids and everything say to me, like, being a hardworking single mom with, you know, a management position, like that's a lot on you. And then you have a whole home to run. You have other little bodies that are depending on you to feed them and take care of them and keep them clean and, you know, get them into sports. And so for me, it's not, you know, I definitely don't think it's up to the employer to decide if you're capable of handling all that or not. That's something that takes, you know, we talked about the A-type personality and being a bold woman, being a risk taker and grabbing that bull by the horns and, you know, managing those professional responsibilities on top of everything else that isn't anybody else's problem, but I don't want to say problem, but, you know, pressure, but your own. And it can be tough, but that's why, you know, we talked about, you know, the type of people that are cut out to do this. And it seems like a lot of us have a lot of those things in common, because that's sort of what it takes within to be able to show up, do that job, manage the stuff behind the scenes, and do it all well, right? And there's some days where, you know, it's like you just, I use the term fake it till you make it, just keep pushing, right? Just keep going. Obviously we talked about, you know, not faking legislation and things like that. You know, you need to know what you're talking about there, but there's sometimes when you just, even walking into those job sites for the first time, you're like, here we go. And you just give it what you got, see what happens. And, you know, if you're brave enough to do it, usually it works out pretty good, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. You just make it work, right? I was lucky to have family supports in place and a pretty supportive partner to help deal with, you know, managing the schedules with the kids and stuff. So I was able to meet that. And by no means did I ever expect an employer in any stage of my life to, you know, bend to meet my personal needs, because those are my stressors to deal with. But I think that while that worked for me because I did have supports, there are a lot of women who don't have the opportunity to enter some of these type of work environments because they don't have the similar supports that I have. And there's very inflexible type of structures or policies and organizations where I think there could be a little bit more give, or at least a little bit, you know, of a review of, well, can we adjust our hours to accommodate people who might have these types of barriers and still be a profitable business? You know, I just think that there could be some work on the supports there on the behalf of organizations. And I think a lot of the reason that that hasn't happened yet is because, one, it's difficult to do. And two, there's still negative beliefs around women in the workforce. We've come a long way, but I still think that there are negative beliefs, particularly around women who are parents, definitely. Yeah.
And there is a difference also between being supportive and really working out whether or not this career move would work for the individual with everything that's in play, as opposed to saying, I don't think you can handle this, so I'm not even going to put you on the table, right? Those are two totally different things. But, you know, I want to kind of move into now talking about how have women influenced the progression of our working landscape here today, because I do believe women coming in, we have changed the landscape in both negative and positive ways. So what are people's thoughts around that?
Well, I go back to that thing where we changed it because we have children at home or we have elder parents. So in order to progress in the world, and women, what's the percentage of women to men in the world? I don't know. You've got to be able to accommodate no matter what sex. I'm sorry. So that's what I think about it.
Well, and even if I might, now these days, though, it's totally okay for men to be at home and helping and looking after the kids. There's maternity leave for men and women both. Do you think that would have happened if women hadn't come into the workplace?
Probably not. No way. We have brought the progression forward. And I think by being kind, we're not out there being aggressive and we're not taking people down. We're eager to go out there and work. We're eager to learn. We're eager to change our landscape because it's such a new field. Oh boy, we don't have to go to an office job or a retail job. We actually get to work in the field that men are playing in, not because we want to hang out with men. It's because we want to make that money.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the most beautiful thing about my job at Safepedia, I'll share this, is how it's okay for our kids to come and pass through on Zoom. And our team actually knows everybody's kids, right? And so, you know, Jamie has some young ones now, and sometimes they bust into the room and we all look at that and we'll see Jamie, and Jamie's going, I'm on a Zoom call right now. And they're like, oh, okay. And they go out and we're like, yeah, okay, that's just a day at the office. You know, it's so normal. It's like, yep. You know, or my son Kalen comes in and asks a question because he's a teenager, right? And everybody's like, yep, just another day at the office. And I think that's a beautiful place for us to finally get to.
It is.
I got a point about that. So I've actually had this conversation before where, you know, when COVID happened, the world changed, everything shut down, and it's almost like we let our work and colleagues into our personal space. And I remember being on a Zoom call and me asking this individual, it was Brenda with WorkSafe. So I'm like, Brenda, is that a background? She's like, no, it's my house. I'm like, wow, it looks like a show home. She's like, thanks. It was featured in a magazine. I'm like, whoa, mind blown. Did not know that. So it's almost like you're learning about your coworkers or colleagues and all the personals. And another conversation I have actually with my marketing team, shout out to Shannon and Caitlin there, is with the introduction of like social media, all these platforms. It's like people want to know you for you and just being like raw and candid. And so we're making progressions and, you know, through innovation and technological advancements as well. But that it opens up doors, right? I'm with this one association. It's the BC Tradeswomen Society. And it's the same thing. A lot of times we're on a Zoom call and there may be kids or pets or people coming in. And just to kind of see, it's not just all work and business, that these people are actually people. We may have similar interests as well. Right. And even, for example, like Stacey and I, we go riding motorcycles together. But originally the relationship started off as there was another safety individual, and they were like, hey, Amandeep, this is Stacey. Stacey, this is Aman. And then just had that conversation. But yeah, I think women, because we connect on a more like emotional level, and we have that social acceptance of being open, being, you know, happy, mad, sad, going through all those emotions, and then we can actually publicly display them too, right? And it's definitely, it's a strength. It's a strength for sure.
I never saw that as a strength, actually.
Yeah. We talk about
emotional in the workplace.
Oh, no. Totally. We talk about mental health. We talk about how like socially, like the way we're socialized, men are always like, they're supposed to be tough and dominant, and they can't be vulnerable. Like a lot of them, they can't. And as we see this in construction as well. Like there's a huge push for mental health, and a lot of times they can't really truly say how they're feeling.
Okay, let me word what I was saying differently. Sure. So when I was working in construction, I still work in construction, I never found being emotional in the workplace was beneficial to me because of that environment, because people weren't comfortable with that. The people I was working with are, you know, it's not acceptable. Remember I said, there's no crying in construction.
Yeah.
There's no room for that. You can be angry. You can be really angry on the job site, but you can't show other emotions very comfortably. So I never felt that worked for me. And in fact, I felt that I needed to change that about myself. I needed to change how sensitive I was to be able to function properly. And so I toughened up, you know, like, and I've heard other people say, you have to be tough, you have to have a thick skin. I hear that common comment from many women working in male-dominated industries. But I do agree with you that it's probably women have transformed those male-dominated workspaces a little bit and made it a little bit more comfortable, because you can't completely eradicate, you know, a part of you. You're emotional, you are. So when you talk to people and you're building, you know, relationships with them, you reveal those little tidbits about yourself, you're open, you're emotional, kind of more on those one-on-ones with people that you trust. And I think for sure it's changed a little bit. Males seem to be a little bit more comfortable being expressive, in my experiences anyways, with my coworkers. So yeah, I think that's a good thing, but it's still a long way to come. And I'm glad to see that, because I think it is probably pretty hard for my male counterparts to feel shame or fear or whatever it is around, you know, expressing emotion or showing emotion in any format, right?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
What if the person, your employer, is the one that's antagonizing you and causing you to be emotional, right? I had that experience once where my boss loved to make me feel like crap. And being an HSP, highly sensitive person, even though I had tomboy characteristics, I started crying.
Mhm.
And it wasn't because it was just, it was upsetting, but I was just thinking, how dare you talk to me like this? And being fearful about speaking up and talking back, because I thought, oh, maybe I'll lose my job.
Mhm.
That's a horrible position to be in.
Mhm.
For me, so I wanted to comment on, you know, the being tough and not being so sensitive. And yeah, there's definitely a large element of that. I think that's partly because you don't want to show the weakness, because that can become a target. But even though you might be tough, that doesn't mean you become a stone, and you still can be real and raw. I mean, I've had where, you know, I just was dealing with something yesterday, and there was a trade that was getting excited, and he was using some colorful language, and he was disrespectful to, you know, our safety coordinator in the field. And I just kind of reined him back, and I said, hey, like, you know, we want to work with you. We don't need to become disrespectful to each other. That's not, we're going to achieve a lot more without that extra resistance that we don't need. You know, let's just remain professional. So I've found that in those emotional situations, and when we use the word emotional, I think it has a negative kind of thing to it, but there's a wide variety of emotions. Being emotional doesn't mean that you're a crying puddle that is overwhelmed and cracking under pressure. You know, being like bold is also an emotional thing. You know, being brave is emotional. And so I find that for me, I just always default back to human nature. Like, hey, you know, I'm not here to ruin your day. I'm just like you. You have your boss that's breathing down your neck. I got my boss that has my requirements that I need to meet. And I find that I've not had that not work out yet, where you just get level with a human to human, and you're like, hey, you know what? Let's take all this stuff that we don't need on top of this, and let's deal with what we're dealing with here. We can do it without all. And at the end of the day, I don't know if that was who was saying about their employer. Find a new employer.
I'm
You
looking.
know, and Tamara, that person that didn't give you that job, as much of a kick in the guts and unfair as that was, I wouldn't want to work for that employer anyway. They did you a favor in the long run. It's not cool, and it's unjust, and that's not a great framework for how they're running their company. But see you later, on to the next one.
Absolutely. And yeah, and that's exactly what happened to them. That's exactly what happened. I mean, there's more to that story. It got even bigger right up to head office, where the person was doing a PowerPoint and showing emails and stuff that he shouldn't have. So that's kind of a whole different beeswax with that person. But right to your point, like, look at the environment. Is this healthy for you? Is this where you want to be?
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we brought in this modern workforce, you know, is assessing, is this environment healthy for my mental health? And, you know, emotional can be, as you said, a wide range of things, right? And it can be negative in some ways if you are, you know, going off at people or turning down to a puddle of tears. Although if you're into a puddle of tears or irate, that's an emotional state too that needs to be considered. Why is that going on, right? And looked at. But another opportunity is, for example, creating nurturing opportunities, like bringing in lunch for people and saying, hey, you know what? Let's put the tools down and have a picnic lunch with everybody. I remember I did that, and the guys were floored.
Yeah.
They were like, what is this? And I was like, it's lunch. What do you want? Nothing. It's lunch. And they couldn't at first register that I had just brought lunch, sandwiches and stuff to be lunch. They had to be an agenda, right?
It wasn't beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's funny that you said that, because one guy says, well, I know we usually get beer at the end of the day, but this is great. I'm so hungry. And they finished it all. They loved it, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I thought of was, I knew some people weren't able to afford to bring lunch. And I had noticed that some people were like just drinking water or skipping over it. I was like, what's going on here? And then I found out, like, well, the paychecks weren't going far enough. So some people were doing without, right? And so that was my solution, was once in a while, just bring in a lunch. You know, you can't do it every day, of course, but
It definitely helps with morale for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have something called the Lunchbox Challenge, in April is construction month in BC. And so that just kind of reminds me of that. Switching gears a little bit. So ladies, has having more women working in the same field, health and safety, impacted your experience differently now? So what I mean by that is they're starting to, there's a slow progression of more and more women. And I know Candice touched on that when you went into school and you saw other females in the class, but let's hear a little bit about that. Let's start with, I don't know, Candice, Stacey, Janice, any one of you guys, just jump in.
Yeah, more women. Well, I mean, it's nice. It is nice to see more female in the trades. I mean, health and safety, like I grew through my career with quite a few women in health and safety. So really where I've seen more women coming in has been on the trade side. And I think it has changed the work environment a little bit. I do actually, you know, I feel kind of spoiled now because after working so many years with mostly men, I've discovered that I really enjoy or prefer working with men over women.
Agree.
Yeah, it's a much better working relationship. Maybe it's a personality thing, but I do find men are straight to the point. They just like to get things done. There's not a ton of drama. There's a lot less drama than there is with women. Yeah, so I don't know. It's been interesting seeing more women come into the trades and how that plays out. But you know, we have female operators where I work. We have female mechanics. We have females in the higher ranks too. I don't know. They're just like people to me. I don't really see them as anything different. They're just other coworkers, and it's just nice to see that it's finally starting to come to like I wouldn't say we have critical mass yet with women in the male-dominated workplaces, but it's getting there. It's certainly better. That probably is due in large part to like what I was saying, that like those macro level type of changes, right? Ideas are starting to change about what women can do, and hiring practices are changing. It's a lot more acceptable for women to be in that landscape working with men, and they're used to it now. I think, you know, in past, it probably would have been helpful for employers maybe to have conversations with the men in the workplace and say, hey, you know, we're bringing a woman on. I know it's a little bit different, but I expect you to treat her the same way. And if there's any issues with her work, you know, the quality of her work or work ethic or personality, like come talk to me. And if I hear any trouble from you, like, just so you know, it's not going to go well. Having those types of conversations, whereas I think now in the beginning that would have helped, now more so people are used to having women there, and there's that expectation that you're just going to treat them like a coworker like anybody else, right? So yeah. I think that changed a lot, which I think also means we've come a long way from expecting. We were stuck, I think, plateaued for a long time. Lots of women were yelling about it, saying, you know, we want maybe not even equitable, but we want to be able to have the same opportunities, or at least a chance at same opportunities. And a lot of the effort fell towards women, I think, on an individual level to change themselves to be able to fit into that mold of where they wanted to work. And nowadays, I think the mold is changing a little bit. So it is more of a welcoming environment for women to work in those type of industries, right? I think that's kind of what's changed for me.
What I find going on the multiple job sites that I do, and I encounter women. Now you got to remember, I've been in construction 40 plus years, and there's two types of women. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's the woman that's the tomboy that's going out there to dress and act like the guy, so she's more accepted. And then there's the woman that goes to work and she still has her hair and her makeup and her jewelry on. And I always think, you know, are they treated the same? Because I don't go to work with jewelry and makeup on. I go the other way. I tend to be more throw the cap on the hair and away I go. Do you guys experience that? Like, I wonder why, my question is, I wonder why women have to change who they are just to go into a male dominated trade.
And how do you mean change? Like to not do the makeup and hair, or?
Right.
I actually find for me, like if I'm in the office or doing something like this, obviously I put a little more effort into it, but generally when I'm in the field, I don't go that extra mile, and I actually get a little bit irritated with women that do, especially in the construction industry or that type of stuff, because it's not a social function. We're here to do a job. And honestly, like if you got a whole bunch of perfume on, or like a lot of sparkly big stuff, like it's a distraction for everybody. I look, they look, everybody looks like,
Yeah.
So, and it's not that I wouldn't want to encourage someone to dress the way they want to dress, but it's like, it's about being appropriate, right? For what you're up to, what you're doing that day. And one thing I want to say, I don't know, this is a little bit different, but something I really appreciate about women in construction is that now we have pink porta potties. And it's not because they're
pink
pink,
hard
it's because
hats.
they're not used by everybody else. That's
Yeah,
the
that is nice.
progression, I would say.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. You should dress for the day you have, but
Right.
being what Janice says, like, should you have to change who you are? Absolutely not. I'm a girly girl at heart. I love to look pretty. It makes me feel confident, to dress nicely and put on makeup or whatever. But obviously, if I'm going to be out doing site visits in the rain, I'm not going to be putting on foundation and mascara. But will I dress professionally and manicure myself so I look good? Yeah, absolutely, because that's what makes me feel good, is when I look professional, right? So yeah, I don't know about question, anyone working with their hands and having massive nails. That's kudos to those women. I don't know how you do it, but no, I don't think we should judge anybody either. If you want to look good on site and that's what you do, then, as long as your personality fits and you can get your job done, go for it. Do what makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I know we're getting short on time, but I did want to find out what you guys are thinking for the future of health and safety. And what do you think that women can be bringing to the future of health and safety? How can we influence this as young leaders?
I think we're doing it right now by having these discussions. Something that Candice and I actually touched on briefly before this whole thing started was listening to her experiences and my experiences. We're closer in the same generation. And then listening to some of the stuff Janice went through, that right there shows you the progression that's going in the right direction. Because Janice has had some of those tougher experiences years before that they're not happening as often now, and especially with bigger companies, right? Bigger companies are always the ones that kind of get it in line first, and then the smaller companies, come along behind. But I think we're doing it right now. I think that, we're putting ourselves out there for allies for other people by having our faces on here and our names and networking through LinkedIn and other things like that. I think, it's in the works right now.
Agreed.
I love that. And even looking at just younger women and the younger generation and coming up, and you're absolutely right. Like having something like this, like a live discussion where everyone's candid and raw about their opinion, and it is. And so I think it makes us more approachable. I think we're setting up, there weren't very many pioneers in health and safety in terms of women in health and safety. But as we're getting up there, we're gaining that experience, and hopefully the younger generation has enough confidence where they can actually approach us or come up to us, or even being on site. There's different societies being made and platforms, and there's different avenues and resources. And just because like one woman being on a construction site, one woman isn't with another company, but they see them on site, approach and have that conversation, or vice versa, right? Have coaches, mentorship in place, and even to the extent of having like formal programs or even informal ones, or just, striking up that conversation. So just having like a bit more acceptance and encouraging that confidence and that level of comfort where they can come up to us and talk to us.
Yeah, I have a question for everybody, because I do have a young teenager in the house, of course, so I'm being schooled on the new way of doing things every single day. And one of the things that he has said to me about our generation that we need to move beyond is the whole gender identity concept, that we need to be more fluid in our perception about gender and the different roles that people can be doing, that we need to break away from defining a gender with roles. What are people's thoughts on that? Because that's coming at us.
Like, what are you saying, that certain genders should have certain roles?
The opposite. He's saying that we're very narrow-minded in putting people in boxes based on their genders, and that the gender is defining people's roles, and that our generation needs to really move away from that. And this is coming at us into the workforce. So it'll be interesting to see how we navigate that as their leaders, right? Like the baby boomers were for us.
Well, I don't know if this completely answers that, but it's a discussion I had with my son as well. He's 11 years old, and he'd said to me the other day about the worst thing you could be is a white straight male. And I stopped and I thought, oh my gosh, pardon me. And he said, well, you know, at school they've got clubs for the LGBTQ, they've got girl power clubs, they've got ESL clubs, they've got Indigenous clubs. The only clubs that don't exist for any type of special privileges or opportunities is for straight white boys. And so I think that alone is going to affect what's going to happen down the road and who we're going to see in the workforce coming out. You know, my boy told me today that he's the only white boy in his class, and that's totally fine and everything, but that's going to change the hiring pool. We're going to see that roll out in the years to come, I think.
Jordan has a question about the ISO, psychological safety.
Yeah, I saw that, and that would be for a discussion for another time, because we're really not adverse on that. So I think Amandeep and I will take that offline and kind of figure out an expert who can speak to that. But I'd really like to continue our conversation about how in the future, moving forward, you know, what's the potential for women to be influencing what's coming down the pipelines? Candice, what were your thoughts going through your head?
Well, I think if we had that back to your question on what your son had presented there, I think if we had that mindset from the get-go, then we probably would have had a little bit easier time as women, but we didn't come from that mindset. We came from mindsets that women had certain roles, men had certain roles. And now probably that type of movement is working for us as women. And I think that women could probably work for that movement because, like I said before, we're collaborative, we're open. I think that for our workplaces to be more inclusive and kind of let go of that ideals, anyways, or at least the hard and fast ideals, we're still going to hold a lot of that in society, because let's be honest, like still the majority of population is typically male, female, and then minority is, you know, gender fluid people. So I think women have a place in helping workplaces transform their practices to be more inclusive, and probably will be advocates or champions when those people do come into workplaces, you know, having those conversations with coworkers, or just, you know, generally being more accepting to that sort of ideal in a workplace, or people like that coming into the workplace to work, right? I think we'll be advocates in creating that more welcoming environment. We've lived through that already, right? I think
yeah, absolutely. And that's where I was hoping we could take this, is that is it possible that in the future, if we're looking at this like 5-10 years, part of our role as the women that we are, the strong women that we become through everything we've gone through, is that just what you said, we understand what it's like to be thought of less than what you are because of the gender that you are. And so, you know, will we be the ones to help shepherd in the new era of being more accepting of everyone?
You know what I think a crucial part that is going to support that is that we have bully and harassment policies now like never before. You know, and there's recognition for when those things are happening. You know, that's a part of orientations now. So I think that some of those tough times that, you know, women have gone through, that have put some of this framework in place, is going to be what's going to help those new opportunities and different types of people coming into the job site be more comfortable and protected, and make that transition smoother and more accepted. Because I mean, we're already getting groomed with it just in daily society, right? So to start sharing the workplace with different types of people, you know, it's not like they're out there, they're around us, we're all together. And yeah, I think with the bullying and harassment policies, that's going to be a huge support for how that's going to work out smoothly.
I think promoting your business. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Janice.
I was saying, you got to hold your own. You know, I've said this before. If we, women typically hold their voice back. They try not to say, they're afraid to stir the pot, whatever. But that's never served me in my past. I found when I found my voice, I had those hard conversations. And it's only when you do that, you're going to get the respect and maybe the recognition. Look at our leaders in politics, right? They didn't back down from the men that were trying to take their feet out from under them. They stood their ground. And I try to emulate that kind of a persona.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why we're in the roles we're in today too, because we've done that for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I just noticed there was a comment saying on the chat, someone saw a post on LinkedIn looking for women or non-binary, which is great, but I think that works against us. I can't remember who said, oh, it was Amandeep, don't just hire me because I'm a woman because you think you need more women in your workplace, hire me on merit. I think organizations truly need to advertise themselves or as their values, rather than saying we're going to look for X amount so we can balance out our ratios so we appear inclusive. No, what Stacey said is correct. Hire people based on their qualifications and their personalities. Look beyond the gender, like Tamara said. If you're out there posting, you know, we want to hire women, we want to hire non-binary person, to me, that's driving us a little bit backwards. That means to me that you're not hiring based on what I can do for you as an individual in your organization. You're hiring me because of my gender, which that's backwards. Are we not going backwards there?
I agree.
I don't know. Are we maybe in a discovery phase where people are trying to figure it out? Like, is that possible? Like, we don't know what, like, I know I look for speakers for conferences, and I will be, and I've said this to Amandeep, you know, I find it very hard to find speakers of different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds. And so one of the things that I've done now as a white woman is intentionally start to click in to communities of different cultures so that I can be meeting people and learning who is out there, because I don't know what else to do.
Well, see, I find this is kind of an oxymoron, because we're looking at that comment about women are non-binary, and it goes back to my initial inquiry about how do we do that? Well, like you said, I think that company is probably exploring how to do that, because in one sentence we're saying, let's hire this person, not based on gender or race, because they're the right one for the job. But then in the next sentence, we're saying, how do we get more genders and races? Like, so this is like, we're going kind of two different directions with the same idea, I think.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is you need to promote your company's values. Make that loud and clear that you are inclusive and that you hire anybody and everybody. You're all welcome to apply.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody goes on the same channels for job search, do they not?
Yep.
Yeah.
So by promoting yourself, you know, I work for an organization that has inclusiveness as a value. It has family values, and I work there because I researched the company and I knew what it was about through my friends. And, you know, I applied there because of that reason. So I think that if companies strive towards that, rather than saying, hey, we're looking for these type of gendered people or non-gendered people, then yeah, that, I don't know if that's the right approach. That would be my advice anyways, is to, you know, promote your values.
Great. That's awesome. Wow. Great conversations. I wish I could spend the day with all of you.
No,
Just being mindful of the time and
yeah.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Maybe we should do like a follow-up.
Yeah.
But just closing thoughts. So what are your last thoughts, and what would you like to leave the audience with today? So we'll start off with any one of you guys can go. Candice, Stacey, or Janice.
I've said it before. I came, I saw, and I conquered. Don't stop. Don't stop. You made the choice to go into the business. Be the best version of yourself and let that other stuff roll off your shoulders and keep going.
Yep.
I love that. I love it. Yeah.
I think
Stacey?
my final say for today, I think, would just be to thank all of you for being a part of this, because this is the movement that we're trying to keep going in that same direction. And yeah, I mean, what got me to where I was being a brave risk taker. And when you get knocked down, you get back up and you keep going. You take, you know, a lot of those hard times are where you learn the most. And so, you know, just keep going. Like, you know, I'm proud of everybody that's doing a good job, working hard. And you know, we talked about if you prefer working with male or female. I like working with good people. You know?
Yeah.
Like I've experienced good and bad on both sides. And so I'm happy to just work with someone who is a good person that wants to do a good job. And yeah, so.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks. And Candice.
Yeah, I mean, I echo that. I think we've come such a long way. There's still a little bit of fine tuning to do. I would just urge everybody to keep plowing through. We still have more, you know, I would like to see more women definitely in the trades. So get together with some of the trade associations that are out there. Amandeep mentioned the BC Trade Society. There's tons of supports out there now for women. So, you know, we still have some areas that we need to fix up as far as barriers. But just keep plugging away, because we're going to eventually get to a point where we won't really have to talk about this anymore, I think. Right? So yeah, thank you. Thanks for having this conversation. This is really great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much to all of you for coming out and having this conversation with Amandeep and I. You know, we didn't know when we started this journey 4 weeks ago where we'd end up. And I think we've ended up in an amazingly beautiful place. You've brought to the table some ideas for further conversations. And what I'd really like to thank you for, though, is being really open and candid and having the hard conversations. Like some of the topics that we've been discussing through everybody's interviews, they weren't easy. But I think through opening up that door just a crack to start those uncomfortable conversations will help other people who listen to this to say, you know, the time is that we can talk. So thank you for that. And Amandeep, thank you so much for this journey with you and Salis, you know, choosing Safepedia to go on this journey for International Women's Month. It's just wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody in the audience for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.